Hey everyone, this is Iron Nicodemus with The Most Interested Man, and today we're doing another video in our series on restoring this classic Remington 1900 side-by-side shotgun. And what we're talking about today is some of the stock dimensions and roughing out the stock out of a blank. So I want to start by talking about stock dimensions. And with a shotgun, fit is so important. You see, with a shotgun, you're really not aiming it as much as you are pointing it. So having a shotgun that fits so that it's natural with the way that you mount the gun and shoot is very important to having a gun that actually hits where you're looking. And when we look at these older guns, again, this gun is about 110 to 20 years old, early 1900s. And when we look at the way that they were built back then, they tended to be a little bit shorter, and then they had quite a bit of drop. So I measured this one out, and when we look at the drop here at the comb, we're at about 2 inches. And then when we go back here, we're at about 2 3/4. This would be the drop at the heel. And back in this time, they really shot a little bit different than we do now. The tendency was to shoot from kind of more of an upright position. So having this drop made more sense. It was also quite a bit shorter, maybe by a ½ inch to an inch shorter length of pull than what we see now. Some of that could be that the average person back then was probably a little bit smaller than they are now. That's what they say anyhow. So overall, the dimensions of the stock are a little bit different than kind of what we see nowadays. So what you're looking for when you think about how to have a stock set up is you're looking at that drop. So you want to have the alignment here. You're looking at the length of pull. So you've got a good amount here to manage the recoil. And then the other thing is, and this gun is empty, as always double check these here. The other thing that we're looking at is cast on and cast off. So when we think about how a gun is lined up here, we have this center line, and shotguns will actually have a little bit of an angle either this way or this way, cast on or cast off. Now this gun, as best I can tell, is pretty much straight on. It doesn't really have any cast either way. And it's not that we need a lot, but we want to have enough that the stock isn't really getting in the way so that our eye is completely lined up. Now the way to check this without having a fitting gun that you can check and adjust all these things is to really just close your eyes, mount the gun, open them, and see where you're at. So if I take this gun right now as it is, and I mount it, and then I open my eye, I'm looking at where I'm aiming down the barrel. And it's not too bad, but I'm a little bit low. The other thing that I'm seeing is that usually I come up just a little bit off to the left. So what I'm thinking is by bringing up here at both the comb and at the heel and just putting a little bit of cast off, maybe somewhere in the range of probably less than 1/4 of an inch, maybe 3/16. And then I want to bring this up from probably where it's at for a 2 inch drop and 2 3/4. Maybe bring both of these up just under maybe a ½ inch. So I'll be somewhere around 1 3/8 inch drop here. Probably bring this up to about 2 1/4, maybe 2 3/8. So I'll still have about the same drop here over the distance. And then as far as my length of pull, right now, I think this guy is about 13 3/4 to the front trigger. I like mine to be about 14 1/4. So we'll probably bring this out just a little bit. Now what I'll do is when I rough the blank in, I'll leave it a little bit longer because I can always cut more off as I get a sense of kind of how it feels once I start to actually build this out. So how am I going to do this? So if my last gun that I showed you, the Savage Fox Model B, I worked with a semi-inletted stock. In this case, I have this blank of walnut that I've had for a couple years, and I'm gonna try to do this right off of a blank. It's gonna be a bit of a challenge because I haven't done that before, but what I'd like to do is start completely from scratch. So what I wanna do is I'm gonna create a template where I can lay out what the gun is going to look like. I'm gonna take this thing out with a bandsaw, kind of get it roughed in, and then we'll do the inletting and the final shaping. So let's start by building out that template. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I want to lay out the gun here on a cardboard template, which I'm then going to use to transfer onto the blank. So let's start by just getting the general feel for where the gun is. I want to get this sight line here. So this is in line with the top of the barrel, And we are right about here. This will help us with what we talked about earlier with the drop. The receiver starts right about there. And then I'm just going to trace out the actual gun itself. I didn't bother taking off the trigger guard yet, but this is going to get us close enough to where we want to be right now. Okay, so this is a template of what we have currently. Now remember we said when we took our measurements that we're a little bit light here on our drop at the comb, as well as our drop in the heel. So I want to bring both of those up just about a ½ inch. So right now we were at somewhere around 2 inches. Let's bring this up, bring it up about a ½ inch. That should put us around 1 inch and maybe 3/8. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, should have had this one down here, is that when we get this here, we're still going to have to deal with the tang that's here. So even though I want to go to a straight grip, and I will need to bend the trigger guard, which should be pretty easy, but there's going to be a point that I can't because of the way that this tang is shaped in here. So somewhere up in here, this is going to need to keep the slope, and then it's going to shift over to the straight grip. So it looks like right now, that spot is somewhere right around here. So we should be able to go from here through here with our new straight grip, somewhere right in this ballpark here. And then up through here, we want to keep plenty of room to go up to the new line here in the receiver. We'll shape this in once we get everything started. So this is what we're now looking at for our template. Now what I want to do with this is I don't want to cut out this section. I actually want to leave this in relief. And the reason is I want to be able to see what this is when we start to put it onto the blank so we can see how the grain flows through it as well as the figure that we want to have. So just give me a minute here. I'm going to cut this section out and we'll revisit it here on the blank. Okay, so I've cut this out and you can see that even after I gave some extra margin here, I also left probably about a little over 1/4 inch all the way around to my template. You can't put wood back, so I'm definitely going to make sure that I have enough here so that if some of my variances are a little bit off, if I need to leave more up here, take some stuff off, I'll have that wood to work with. So what I'm going to do now is when we place this on the blank, I want to be able to see how this grain is going to flow through the stock and position it. Now, thankfully, this here is big enough that I have quite a bit to work with. And the way that I'm going to be able to see kind of what I'm dealing with is to put a little bit of water on this. And this is going to bring this grain out. So I'm going to be able to start to see how it flows and what that figure looks like. But what we're trying to do as we lay this out is, one, we want to have some good figure in here. So if there's an area that we see that we really like, we can make sure that we maintain that. But then I also want to really make sure that I've got a good straight grain here going through the grip. A lot of the time when you look at these old guns, and the reason that they crack through here like this one did, you can see it in a few spots here, is because the grain wasn't that strong. Now, the other thing is, just as they're older, they tend to soak up oil. This is already a pretty thin area, and those will just crack just because of age. But what we want to do is make sure that as much as possible, we have a good straight grain going through there, as opposed to some sort of off the line grain with the wood.